Sometimes the clarity that we need shows up in someone else's story, and it changes everything. In this episode, Ryan Hennessey shares the exact moment he realized that he was no longer willing to live in this burnout stage, and how stepping away from the classroom helped him step into this more aligned, heart led life. It's a story about reflection, courage, and choosing yourself, even when the next step feels uncertain.
This woman's not just telling her story. She's telling mine. Like, I'm watching a person tell the exact story of what I'm going through. And it is clear as day to me that that woman up front needs to make a radical change in her life. And she needs to take back control of her life. And it like fused together. Like, I need to take back control of my life, and I need to make a radical change.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
Thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift podcast. You sent a very kind message about being a part of the show. And I know we went back and forth, and people listening probably don't know, or they probably know if they're here again. They know I don't like to do a lot of research. So that's all I know about you, which is always a fun part for me. It all stems from an experience I had when I was 8, which was I was visiting my father. My parents lived thousands of miles apart. I lived with my mom full time. She was on a trip with her boyfriend. I was at summer camp near my dad's house. I got brought into his office one day, and he had to tell me that my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in time, which I call kind of like a line in the sand type moment, this life shift moment, everything about my life was going to be different. Anything that we had imagined for it was no longer possible. I say all that to say I didn't have the tools to grieve and do all the right things, right? And so behind the scenes, I was always wondering, do other people have these line in the sand moments in which like everything is different from one day to the next? You know, something triggered something, and then all of a sudden, good or bad, things changed. And so I've just been on this beautiful couple-year journey now of talking to people like yourself about these line in the sand moments and how, you know, we can take them and we can do things with them, whether they're external, whether they're internal, however that goes. And I find that every story has a piece that I didn't know I needed to help me on my healing journey. So that was just a little preface, but thank you for being a part of it.
Thanks for having me. What a powerful why that you do this, and I appreciate it. And of course, whenever anybody goes through their moment, there's a lesson to be learned, right? Whether you're in that moment or not. So very powerful stuff.
You know, and the naive version of me when I started this was like, yeah, it's just one life shift moment. Nobody has more than one. And it's like, we have them all the time, right? If we have the power or the self-awareness to be able to reflect, right, and understand why we made the choices we made, how can that be better in a different way? You know, like, what can we do moving forward? I think there's such power in that. So I'm sure you have multiple life shift moments.
Absolutely. And I feel like my life shift moments, the ones that you have a choice in, the ones that maybe you bring upon yourself, if you don't see the lesson in those, a lot of times they're going to keep coming back around until you get the lesson, right?
There's something about that history repeating itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So before we get into your life shift moment story, maybe you can tell us 2025, who is Ryan? How do you like identify or show up in the world?
I'm a coach. I'm a transformative adventure-based wellness facilitator. So I've created these retreats. And then I also do some tutoring. I start a program called collaborative tutoring, which is essentially like a small classroom where I'm teaching math and science, but with a group of students all working towards the same goal and learning from each other and from me.
How long have you been doing these pieces? I know it's part of your story, but how long are you this version of you?
2 months. So very fresh. Yes. Wow. Very fresh. Yep. So 2025 version of me still included me as a high school science teacher. So I was a high school science teacher up until March, actually. And so that would be kind of the story. But so primarily I'm a father, and that plays a huge role in the story as well. And my daughter is just turned 13 months old.
That's a life shift in itself.
She keeps us busy. Absolutely. And that really was the driving force between like, hey, it's time to draw the line in the sand and make a shift.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that in itself, just having a kid changes your world completely. And then you add all the other internal fires and just wanting to be like your own human and the human that makes the choices that you want to make. So I think there's a lot of power in that. And I love that you're like so new in your journey, because I bet after this episode comes out and like you listen to it 6 months later, you're gonna be like, wow, that's quite a different journey than I am on now. So that's fun.
Absolutely. Even in the last 8 weeks, so much has shifted, right? And every time something comes up, I roll with it and I change. And so, yeah, I think listening to this in a few months, it's going to be like, oh, I didn't even know what I didn't know, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe you can kind of paint the picture of your life leading up to kind of this line in the sand moment, this pivot that you had in your life that changed the trajectory, hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I've been a teacher for 10 years, and starting out, I mean, I should almost back up and say when I was in middle school and high school, I was the student that everybody hates. The teachers hated to have in their class. I was disruptive. I skipped class. I didn't put in any effort, but then randomly I'd take a test and, get a B or something, and just enough to get myself by. And so my journey with education started in middle school and high school, where I didn't have motivation. I didn't see the relevance in what I was being taught to learn. And along the way, I had a couple of teachers who really made an impact, and they kind of fell into two buckets for me. I had teachers who showed up for me as a human being again and again. I could make mistakes. They would hold me accountable. And then when I'd show up the next day, they would see me as a person and welcome me and, make you feel like you belong in that space. So I had two teachers that really come to mind when I think about that. And then I had two different teachers who created learning environments that were just epic, like these put together these lessons that were transformative, and they were memorable, and
that you actually wanted to do.
And I remember being a seventh grader and I was failing most of my classes, and I wanted to be a part of this. And like, sometimes they would even use it as the carrot of like, hey, we have this thing coming up this next week. You have to be at this grade point average or above, otherwise you're going to be sitting out. And I would be like, I'm going to get my stuff in then, because I want to do that. But they were, this combination of teachers who both made learning really meaningful and also created a space in which like felt safe, especially in middle school when you're trying to figure out who you are and how you show up in the world. It took me a long time to figure out how to show up in the world in a meaningful, way that contributes to society. That had me kind of take on the journey of like, I want to be an educator. And even through undergrad, my path was very similar, where I just wasn't super motivated, didn't see the relevance in what the standards were that were put in front of me. And it wasn't until I got into a classroom of my own that I was like, I fell in love. I'm like, this is what I was meant to do, because I can do things different and I can show up in a way that's meaningful, and I can create a space where students can show up and be seen and be their truest authentic selves and take risks and fail horribly, but in like a safe, controlled environment, and learn from those failures. And it was truly like this switch had flipped inside of me. And all of a sudden I actually went back to school for my master's degree in educational psychology. And I wanted to know more about the profession and how I could be better.
So you were checking the box before then. You were just like, I got to graduate so I can actually teach. And you're like, oh, wait, maybe I want to learn a little bit more to be better.
And there's a time during my student teaching where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to teach. And when I graduated college, I went and I took a job doing test and balance for HVAC systems, because I was like, it's not really for me. And it just felt like the universe kept calling me back. And eventually I was like, this is definitely not what I want to do. And I ended up accepting a teaching job, being like, well, what's the worst can happen? And literally, like, that was kind of my mindset.
What grade were you going into?
8th grade science. So it's Earth and space. Yeah. And
so thinking of that eighth grade version of you, you're like, you got a bunch of U's.
Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I had class sizes of like 46 and, trying to learn science, and it kicked my ass in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways that I needed. You know what I mean? It kind of broke me down and forced me to become more organized and more communicative and more empathetic. It forced me to grow in a lot of like really amazing ways. And I loved it. And that's ultimately what's like, oh, I want to go back to school. Like, I want to learn more. which is the first time in my life that I was like, yes, school. Like I want to go and learn. Basically, my thought process was I kind of didn't take advantage of what was available to me the first however many years that is, 18
20
years of education. Yeah, right. I didn't take advantage of that. And so I was like, I want to go back for something that's meaningful. I don't want to just check this box. And so I went and I didn't just take the master's that like a lot of teachers just get so they can get a pay raise. I went back and I went into one that was specifically about teaching and learning and working beside video game designers, like how do we make things engaging and fun?
Yeah. Well, because I would imagine too, teaching in middle school, I think you're also kind of realizing that it's not all the subject, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of personality happening because like you said,
Absolutely.
people are trying to find themselves and find the people around them. So it's like two layers. So it seems like your master's focus was probably a smart one to
Yeah.
help you.
And that's really what it is while you're teaching, you're doing so much more than teaching. And actually that's kind of controversial. I've realized as I've shared some of these
Oh,
thoughts.
really?
Yeah, because some teachers are like, no, you're the problem with teaching. There shouldn't be an expectation that we need to take care of people's feelings and we need to do this, this, and this. And I completely see both sides of the coin.
Yeah. But I think of all the people, whenever you hear somebody say or mention their favorite teacher, it's never like, I loved writing that final report about XYZ. Like it was never that. It's always how you felt or how did they care about you as a human, not just another number.
Yeah, and I think like to some degree, we probably need both types of teachers. They kind of balance each other out. And in a lot of ways, and what leads to my story is the teachers who put everything in and try to create meaningful, like everything and make everything meaningful, they burn out. It's kind of like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. There's these systems that are working against you, and the more you put in isn't necessarily going to mean a better product. It just means you're more drained.
Yeah. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to make this enjoyable and fulfilling for you, it's going to take a lot more energy than the system is prepared to help you along with or support or, like they're just like,
Absolutely.
here's the test, here's your Scantron, go for it. Like grade this later on I just aged myself by saying Scantron, but I think there are so many systems in which like, if you want to be like this fantastic, not well known, but well-respected teacher, the system doesn't support that. So I could imagine there's also that, like, you're not even helping me try to be a good teacher, right?
Yes. And ultimately that's where like that's what I felt like the last, 5 years of my career was I want to do bigger and better things. I want to do these things for my students. Somebody please help me, like step in and like make this accessible to me because I don't have the energy that I had in the time when I was 22, but I still want to teach at that level. Like anything less than that doesn't feel like it's what my students deserve. And so you kind of get in this tension of like, do I burn myself out and give more than I have to give? Or do I just give them the worksheet and collect my paycheck? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you're in the camp of caring, that's really hard to do that second one until you don't care anymore. Was that something you were actively seeking help with from like administration or things like that, or were you trying to take the world on your own?
Over the last 5 years, a number of things that I tried, can I even trying to work with the district and saying like, hey, can I work 0.8 FTE? Like, can I just teach 4 classes instead of 5 classes that I can get out an hour and a half early and spend time with my daughter? I was also, so actually after I got my master's, I went back, they'd asked me to come back and do my PhD, which again, for a kid who failed most of his life, it really felt like an opportunity that I couldn't turn down. And so when that came up, I left for a year and I had to take a year leave of absence. And then I was trying to figure out like, how do I do my dissertation? How do I the thing that I wanted to do was create a meaningful curriculum that weaved STEM. So like engineering design with SEL, which is social emotional learning. Like, how do we, like, these two things have so much parallel. How do we weave these things together and create a product that's going to be amazing to students? Because it's both those things that I was talking about, right? It's like, how do we create engaging, interactive, meaningful lessons? And also, how do we talk about these skills that are not talked about? How do we make sure that students have these communicative these skills to talk about how they're feeling and to navigate relationships and complex problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, especially too, this is total stereotyping, so you're welcome. But like math and science, when you're teaching those things, I think if you just teach that, you don't teach the elements of like being a human, you can also create a robot in a way.
Absolutely.
Like, like it feels very sterile is not the right word, but it feels very directional and not as like as much of a hug, if you will. It feels very strict and confining. So I mean, I commend you for that. I think that's the way you do it. That's the way you should do it.
Right. And if you think about like the practice of actual like science, like how do you do science? It should be an independent thought process of like, how do we make this thing better? How do we ask better questions? And it shouldn't be this linear path of like, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to learn this skill, then this skill, then this skill. And of course, to tackle more complex problems, you need more complex, progressively stronger skills. But we've kind of gotten away from the ask your own questions and let's see what you want to explore about this topic.
Right. Were you in a place where it was like a teach to the test type environment that they wanted from you?
Not necessarily. Our district had just gone through a kind of a transition so at least in Minnesota, I think nationwide, people are moving towards this new curriculum that is called phenomenon based. It's next generation science standards. And it's supposed to be kind of a flipped model from the traditional of like teacher stands in front of the class and lectures and gives all of this direct instruction. And then students go and practice. It's supposed to be more like, here's a phenomenon and experience it, ask your own questions, and then we'll follow up from there, which is great. But
if it works,
right. It's one of those things that, when there's a really well orchestrated lesson and that's put in front of students or anybody, it is meaningful. But then when you buy curriculum from Pearson or one of the large textbook companies that just says like, yes, this is all phenomenon based. So when you buy something from a textbook manufacturer, a lot of times it's just textbook learning in a different dressing,
which is not what you wanted to do. So you were trying to get better. Did you feel supported along the way? Because I mean, they asked you to get your PhD. So does that feel like support for you?
They didn't ask me to get my PhD. So I sought out my own master's. Our district they have a nice pay scale increase. So like once you get your master's, you make some more money. And then beyond master's, they actually offer some additional. So they make it worth it to some degree. The PhD didn't feel worth it to me. I didn't finish my PhD because I kind of got to this point where I had to either take a year away from teaching, which they actually wouldn't let me do because I already used my year away from teaching to start the PhD. So I'd done all my classes. I just wanted to do my dissertation, but it was about $35,000 to like go and write a paper. And I'd have to take time from teaching. And ultimately, my whole goal of doing all of that was to become a better teacher and to make a bigger impact in the classroom. So I put that on pause for as long as I could put it on pause. And then eventually got to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm going to officially say that I'm out of this program until further notice. So those were those pieces. And that was where I was trying to work with district and administration and figure out like, how do I make both of these things work so that we can continue leveling up, creating this curriculum that the entire district could use or beyond. So that part felt hard. So my progression was really like falling in love with the profession and it breaking me down and building me back up in ways that I didn't even know I was capable of. It taught me so much. But then I kind of hit this inflection point, and it was kind of when I came back from doing a year away for my PhD, where I had all of this momentum and my goals had grown and I had so much more learning that I wanted to do. And then it was kind of like, I kind of started feeling boxed in. It started to feel more suffocating than it was this thing that was growing me. And so I got to the point where I didn't feel like I had space to breathe or to like be this larger version of myself that I was becoming. And that grew for many years. And for many years, I kind of kept it at bay by taking on other hobbies or taking on other certifications. And then it was this new curriculum thing that I was talking about that so for the first 6 years, I taught a curriculum with an extraordinary team of educators. We built this curriculum that was super meaningful. And when I left and I came back, COVID happened in between that year. And when I came back, I was a new school, a new curriculum, new team. And so it's just the amount of energy, right? Like, again, that curriculum wasn't atrocious, but it wasn't mine. So it still took an enormous amount of energy just to get it back up to what I felt like my students deserved. And then last year we got another new curriculum, and that one was rather atrocious. And so that really was my like, okay, like I have to put in so much more energy than I have. And then my daughter was born, and all of a sudden my time became priceless, and I'm already at work 8-9 hours a day, or out of the house 8-9 hours a day. And then I come home and I have to grade, and I have to respond to emails, and I have to plan. So it became overwhelming.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, it's a lot harder to find the joy or find the light when you're forced to teach something that doesn't bring that to you. So it's like double the energy to do what you were doing 8 hours worth. Like the 8 hours in this terrible curriculum is like 16 hours of energy when you were enjoying like the aspects that you could control.
Yeah, because a lesson that you build and that is engaging and gets the kids excited and meaningful learning is taking place, that fills you up. It really does.
Yeah. It's not as exhausting.
Right. And the opposite happens if you've ever seen anybody read a PowerPoint that's not theirs. It's a train wreck, and it's not great. So you either are like,
For anyone.
right? The students, yeah, more so than me, because they have 6 hours of it. Yeah, I at least get a little bit better throughout the day. So yeah, it kind of became this thing that like I absolutely still love working with students. Like it never was the students to me. I know a lot of people leave because the students are off the rails. I always loved working with the students. I just got burnt out working against the system, is what it felt like.
How are your peers in all this? Were they like shut up and get in line, or were they supportive of your passion for it? Let's call them by name.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Oh, are you saying of me wanting to do more? It was we commiserated. It was a shared, like, this is terrible. And yeah, I definitely had some friction or frustrations when I was like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's buy this, and let's get this wood, and we're going to build this contraption, and we're going to teach the Coriolis effect by spinning the kids instead of just having them draw with a marker on a globe, and they're like, there's so much to do. We don't have time for that, and there's truth to that. But I think like I ran up against that as well, of like everybody's exhausted. Nobody has the energy to put in more.
Which is not energizing at all to see the other people around you also exhausted. You'd naturally it's like a groupthink kind of thing going on too.
Right. And so there were plenty of times where I would like, all right, and I'd go rogue and I'd build my own lesson, and I would still do the thing that I thought was meaningful, but that wasn't sustainable. Every time I did that, it was great, but I was like, okay, I put in 20 hours of work for this 1 hour lesson, and the students really appreciated it, but was the juice worth the squeeze in the long run? Right.
Yeah. Do you start building resentment towards the profession, towards the industry as you're kind of burning out here? Because I would.
Yeah. Yes and no. I think throughout the whole thing, I really kept a clear head about like, there's this larger system. It didn't feel like it was any one person. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think the administration in my building were like evil and out to get me or anything like that.
They were doing their job.
They were doing their job. They're trying to run a building, and absolutely. And then when I look at the district level, it's kind of the same thing. They have a finite amount of resources, and they need to allocate it. It was one of those that was hard because it didn't feel like there was one person that I could just like direct my hatred towards and overcome. It just felt like a systemic issue that wasn't going to change overnight.
Yeah, and that it would be hard for you to fix.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Very, very hard. Right. It's like more of a policy level thing at the state or national level. Yeah. And so in December, December 2024, I signed up for a heart-led business retreat in Los Angeles because I know I had the idea of doing some of the stuff that I've shared that I'm doing. I had those ideas. I knew I wanted it to be meaningful because a lot of my search or my soul searching for the couple of years up to this point was applying for jobs and just kind of treating it as practice. So I'd apply for a job. I would keep my resume up to date. I would interview, and sometimes I'd even get offered the job. And then I was able to weigh that job to teaching. And I really did. I mean, teaching, again, I don't have this resentment. I'm not telling anybody don't go into teaching, because it holds a special place in my heart. And every time I would compare, like, do I want to go work in a warehouse as a manager and manage a bunch of people? Like, how would that match up to doing amazing science lessons with amazing students and like being overworked? Sure. But, and every time I would compare the two, I'd go back to teaching. And that kind of kept me, it felt like I was at least in control. I was making the choice of doing the thing I wanted to do. So I signed up for this retreat. And as I was there on the first day, I was listening to a woman speak. She was a real estate agent, and she was really good at her job. She loved it for so many years. It brought her so much joy. She was trying to be the heart-led real estate agent that was taking care of people instead of just like a bottom line. As she spoke, it started to become really apparent that she was carrying a lot of weight. And she talked about how it had become suffocating for her and how she started to have this growing sense of dread to like go into work each day. She talked about missing formative years of her daughter's life that she'll never get back, and she got to this point where she's like cowering in the corner a little bit. I mean, her body was telling more of the story than her words actually were. And I got to this point where my body started to have a visceral reaction. My heart started to race. My hands started getting kind of sweaty, and it all just kind of fused together in this one moment of like, this woman's not just telling her story. She's telling mine. Like, I'm watching a person tell the exact story of what I'm going through. And it is clear as day to me that that woman up front needs to make a radical change in her life. And she needs to take back control of her life. And it like fused together like, oh shit, I need to take back control of my life, and I need to make a radical change. And by the end of that weekend, it was non-negotiable that I was leaving teaching, and that I was leaving before the end of the school year. That was kind of my, like, I've been operating at an unsustainable pace for way too long. This time with my daughter is more valuable than anything that I'll ever get back.
Yeah. It was these gentle reminders from someone that was living the same kind of experience as you. It reminds me of, I'm sure you've had this experience in which, like, maybe when you were growing up, your parents would tell you something all the time and you'd be like, you just didn't listen to them, but then you heard someone else say it and you're like, oh, wow, that's such a great idea. And then your parents are like, I've been saying that forever.
Yes.
It's like one of those things where you need to kind of see it or read it again or whatever it may be. And it hits you right at, like, had you gone maybe 6 months earlier, maybe that wouldn't have affected you in the same way, right? Like, it feels like very serendipitous that it was like that time for you to be like, there's the last straw.
100%. That's what it was. And I just remember texting my wife, like, I need to leave teaching. And like, to say that, because before my daughter was born, teaching was the thing that I was the most proud of. The lessons, the relationships with students, the impact, the measurable impact I've had on their lives, like that defined who I was, and that became who I was. And so to leave that part of me behind, there's like a ton of grieving with that, like because there was still actively, like, I still loved so many parts of my job. And also I could no longer win between this tension of like, do I take my time away from my family and my daughter, or do I give my students something that I think isn't what they deserve? And I mean, I got into this whole trajectory because I wanted to become the teacher that I needed when I was in middle school, when I was in high school. And to give anything less than that felt like I was failing them and failing me.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, you were, right? Like, you were that teacher for many students.
Yeah.
Throughout the years that you did it. And it sounds like from what you described you're doing now, it's not like you're still teaching, like you're still doing the parts of it that you love, but you're creating the universe that you're doing it in, right? Like, it's not a hard pivot as much as it's not like you went into like deep sea fishing. I don't know why. I guess that would still be teaching, but like, it feels like you were able to maintain the things you loved about it.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that was part of, thankfully, I was at that retreat when I had that moment, right? Because then the following day, I was able to unpack so much of that and start generating this escape plan of like, I'm not just going to not show up for work on Monday and say I'm out, because I didn't leave teaching for another like 3 months. I created this escape plan of like, what do I love about teaching? And how do I take the aspects that I love in my zone of genius? And how do I apply that to something else that I can make money in, that I can still empower people in, that I can still create meaningful experiences? And these three aspects of my company are now what came out of that.
Yeah. What, before you go more into that, what made you choose that session? Like, you weren't close to Los Angeles. Like why that session? How did that come
No,
about?
the guy who ran it is Mark Groves. So he's a person who I've followed his body of work for a long time, read his book, and I just resonated a lot with the messaging that he was providing. And ultimately, like, he's kind of one of the people who has walked the walk of what I want to do. I mean, he does men's work, he does healing work, he does retreats. And so like that was kind of in the back of mind when I was looking at that specific retreat of like, and that was the first investment dollar I've ever spent to myself. You know, I had never done a coaching thing. I'd never gone on a men's retreat. I'd never done any of those things. And then I was like, I'm going to do this. And something was just it was so absolute that this needed to happen. And we had a 6-month-old, and my wife was like, you need to do this. Like, we'll figure it out. And she supported me all the way through, and we made it happen. And it did. It felt serendipitous. Like that was the moment that had to happen.
Yeah. Cause I mean, if that's not your normal approach to things, like signing up for, things like that and going to a different state and doing all these extra things, it's like, why then? And so you're probably like, this was like, your subconscious was like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Like, we need to do something, because burnout sneaks up on you too. I don't know if you experience that, but like in my own life, it's like suddenly I like feel it all, right? And then you look back and you're like, oh, I just missed every single hint of burnout, right, along the way. So good on you for choosing that. And it's hard for people to do, because I'm sure there were expenses involved and you have to like invest in yourself. And I think a lot of us are like, well, is it going to be an immediate return, or, think like that. And here you go. It gave you the message you needed.
Exactly.
Right.
You think about what else you could do with that money, and it's like, that's a lot of money. And that's ultimately why I've said no 100 other times to going on a retreat or going and doing coaching. And as soon as I did, it was just like everything just amplified. And then even leaving there, I ended up signing up and doing coaching work with Mark, the guy who ran the retreat. And it's been just like leaps and bounds that I've known I was capable of. And also, I don't know that I could have done it without somebody, like, borrowing somebody else's belief that like, hell yeah, you can do this,
Yeah. I mean, it's really like that whole saying, like, just take the first step, right? Like that was your first step, and it snowballed into something bigger. Did you talk to that woman at all?
Yeah, I stay in touch with her. Yep. Yeah, that evening there's a group of us that had grabbed dinner, and her and I were there, and the more we talk, the more we're like, oh my god, like we have the same story to some degree. And so it's been fun to touch base and be like, hey, have you blown up your life yet? Have you made these impactful changes? And she's done a lot of work, but she's still working through it. So am I, as am I. I don't pretend to be the guru that's got it all figured out.
Well, I don't think any of us really do. But I think there's something to be said right there about her sharing vulnerability. And there's such power in not having to be the know-it-all or the everything's perfect kind of person. Like, just sharing the real versions of ourselves can help other people. It can mirror things for other people. I mean, you were able to see your experience through that, whatever
Absolutely.
she was doing or saying. I think and that's kind of the reason I do this podcast, in a sense, because it's like you hear other people's stories, and it can validate something, or it might inspire you to take that, invest in a class or something like that. And it's so important, thinking of, the middle school version of you, or the 8-year-old version of me who thought like, I'll never grow up because I have a dead mom. Like, do people exist out there that have dead moms that are successful? Like it was
Right.
not a logical thought, but it was an emotional thought of like, I don't know, is it possible to live without a mom? Well, I don't know. But had I heard somebody or seen somebody that didn't have one, maybe I would have felt a little different. Maybe I would have approached it differently. So I love that she was putting it all out there, because even if no one else took that message, you took the message that you needed at that time to catapult you into this newer version of you. So when you left there, was it like, did you feel different? Did you feel like different purpose, walking in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole sequence felt like a reclamation of my power. Even just the making the decision to walk away felt like I was taking control, because with teaching being so polarized, it makes you play so small and constantly watch what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're XYZ. And it feels like you're constantly operating from a place of like trying to piss off as few people as possible. There's just a truth to that, because everybody's so polarized, and education for some reason is in the limelight of like indoctrination and all of these things, even though I've never met any teacher that's trying to impose their views, but
they have other things to worry about.
Yeah. And so there became this liberation kind of, and like, it wasn't like I was just starting to drop F-bombs in front of students and, any of that, because I took that part very serious of like, I'm going to teach up until the last moment. And in fact, I'm going to teach better. I put together a 2-week grand finale of like, we're going to have deep conversations. We're going to do the best lessons. We're going to, build out giant escape rooms and do giant life-size bridges out of giant Legos and make a huge mess in the room. And we're going to create these memorable experiences that I've been too burnt out to create for the last couple of years. And we're going to do it big. And we're going to talk about this transition for me and what it means for you. And yeah, and it was really powerful. And that whole process just felt like step by step by step of reclaiming my power.
Was there any fear that you were going to love it again and then fall back into it?
Every day. Every day that I was in there, and I would have like that moment where I'm like, I love this, or that kid is so funny, or somebody comes in and thanks you for something. Especially once I made it known that I was leaving, I had so many powerful connections with students that were just like, hey, I just want you to know that you showed up for me in this way, and this changed everything for me. Like so many times where I'd like legitimately, they'd leave the room and I'd break down crying, because I'm like, how could I walk away from this?
Yeah, that's a challenge.
But yeah, and it felt right, and it felt like I was abandoning my students to a large degree. Kind of like if I'm not going to show up for them, who is? But
that's tough. How did you push through it?
The way that the understanding that I came to was, if I was going to, I had the option of basically becoming the teacher who was resentful and just gave the worksheet, and like, if I had to weigh the option of me becoming this teacher who didn't care and didn't give them the education they deserved, I would be failing them in a much greater way than me choosing myself and going on this journey really of pursuing an aligned life and building a life for myself that is aligned with my passions, my interests, my zones of expertise, my family, my time, and creating something far bigger than I could have imagined had I stayed in that role. And so that was kind of my piece, is like, how do I set an example for them when I walk away, of how do you walk away from something with dignity and with grace and leaving it maybe a little better than you found it, and ultimately choosing yourself.
Was there a fear, or how do you walk away from something that is stable though? Like, I feel like that's a piece that I would be challenged of, like, okay, I'm going to leave this and go off and do my own thing. Was that something that you were fearful of? Was that like, you were like, no, I got it?
Depends on the day that you ask me. I have a myriad of skills, backgrounds. In the last couple of years, I got my real estate license. I got my pilot's license. I worked forever in restaurants. So I have kind of like this large background of skills that I'm like, no matter what,
you're just in case skills.
Exactly. No matter what. And my teaching license is still good for 5 years. Like, no matter what, I'm going to figure it out. But I'll never know unless I take this leap. I'll never know how incredible my life, how aligned my life could be, unless I commit. And if I commit and I fail, at least I'll know what I'm capable of. But if I commit and things take off and create this abundant life, I think the thing that was the most mind blowing to me was the first 6 weeks after leaving. Of course, I had this like idea that I was going to make some money, like, oh yeah, everybody's going to want to work with me and blah, blah, blah. In the first 6 weeks, I didn't make $1, not a single dollar, but I spent on average probably 15 hours a week outside with my daughter, and we had dance parties in the morning, and we laughed and played, and I connected with people who make my heart happy and deepened relationships. And it truly was, and still is, it's been the most abundant period of my life without a single dollar coming in. I'm like, of course there's always that like financial stress of like bills are coming up and things are due. But yeah, it was abundance like I've never known. And it still is abundance like I've never known. And there's not financial abundance that's correlated with that.
Right. Well, and I would imagine that if you feel that personal love, abundance, if you're full, right? If you get a lot of that, that's naturally going to energize you to get more aligned in the profession piece as well. I feel like if it was the opposite and you didn't have any of that abundance, it'd be really hard to kind of like push through to
Absolutely.
do the things that you want to do professionally. So I think that they do align. It's just maybe they're a little staggered right now, and you got to build things up too. It's not like come running out of the gate, right?
Right. And it is that it's like fuel for creativity. Since, I don't know, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've done a lot of writing when things are hard and I need to kind of untangle some things. And it's always been kind of a goal of mine I'm going to write daily, or I'm going to write weekly, or I'm going to just try to write. And I'll look at that document when I'm teaching, and I would go like full years without looking at it, or, 6 months at a time, because like the creative energy is just so tapped out when you're pouring everything you have and you don't have anything else. And since I've left, every single day I've been writing, and I've been writing like good stuff. I'm like writing things that people want to read. And it's just like, I have this clarity from being able to do that, from being able to write these messy thoughts every single day. When I go to speak them or think them, it's all just so much more articulate. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful to have that shift, whether or not the financial stability is even fully there yet.
I feel like you put in the work and it'll get there. I mean, especially Absolutely. When you're leading, when it's heart led, when your full passion is in it, it feels like it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time, right? What does the next like 6 months look like for you in your plotted future?
It's going to be awesome, to be honest. I'm launching my first retreat this summer. So we're doing 7 days in Banff National Park up in Canada, which is going to be hiking and camping and all of that. So that'll be the first actual retreat, which will be incredible. My wife and I are going to rent our house out, and we're going to travel for like a year. That's the plan. Our plans change a lot, but our plan is to actually rent this house out and see if we can stay in Airbnbs that are cheaper than this, just to have like a net wash, but be able to go spend a month in California, go spend a month in Alaska, be able to travel in a way that's like home base bound, so that because we do have a young daughter, and we do have I built a camper van out. And so my wife and I did a lot of traveling in that before we had a daughter, and now it's like, there's no way. So yeah, it'll be a lot of traveling, and then it'll be I'll be able to do the coaching remote. I've actually been doing a little bit more tutoring remote as well than the in-person stuff. I won't be able to do that from the road, and then I'll continue building out these retreats. So I'm doing Banff this summer and Hawaii in January, the Big Island. And then beyond that is just lovely. And I get to choose what the next location is. And with these retreats, it's like, again, I don't pretend to be the person with all of the answers. It's really like, this is an experience that I know that I've needed in my life, so many different periods that bring clarity, that challenge me, that push me outside of my comfort zone and teach me what I'm capable of. And as I'm planning these retreats, I'm just planning them for that version of me that just desperately needed some camaraderie, some challenge, some excitement, some perspective.
Well, I would imagine too that you're going to get something from all those retreats too. I mean, it's not just a financial benefit there. There's also the fact that you're probably going to, be in community with people that you had never met before. And now you're creating new relationships, which are obviously going to teach you things, because that's just how human experience works, right? Like, I feel like we can grow from each other. So what a beautiful way to create something for yourself, but also serve other people. When you're talking about these retreats, are they like, what is the ideal number of people on this retreat in your world?
In my world, it would be 15 people or less. So it's not this massive, like 100
Nobody
people
wants
where
that.
you're just kind of falling in the right. It's supposed to be something that's intimate. And so in my business mind, if there becomes a higher demand than that, I'll just do 2 back to back, right? And I'll just have this group and then that group, because I don't want it to be something where people are falling through the cracks. I want it to be intimate, something where, so this summer is a men's retreat, but then Hawaii is open to anybody. And so I wanted to start with a men's retreat because I want to get really clear on my messaging of like, how do we show up in the world as men, and how do we ask these questions, and how do we
Be full humans.
be full humans? How do we be vulnerable and share our feelings with one another? And how do we do that? And in my experience, we do that through experience, right? Like we do that through doing something together. It's a really good catalyst for kind of breaking down your your external armor, your internal armor, and getting conversations to flow about like, what are you struggling with? Because you're physically struggling as you're going through some of these periods, and it has a way of just kind of disarming people. And there's a lot of space in between to laugh, connect, commiserate sometimes when things are hard, and break down those barriers that get in the way.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's such value there. Do you feel different? Do you feel different in this portion of your life than when you were in your teaching moments?
Absolutely. My body felt different the day I left. Like
Tension and
there's
whatnot?
so much tension just constantly in my body that I wasn't even aware of. And and I feel more powerful, more capable. I think I've always been this capable, but I think stepping out of a world in which you're constantly under scrutiny and you're constantly walking on eggshells and listening to following protocol and worried about screwing something up, especially when it's so tied up in your identity. It's so empowering to be able to spend your time and energy how you see fit, what you see as, meaningful, and not feel like, I think I've been a lifelong people pleaser to some degree, and to break out of that and be like, I don't have to do that anymore. Like that was something that at some point in my life gained me safety and security. And now I get to choose me and my family and to build something that's meaningful, regardless of what other people think. It's been really empowering.
Oh, I bet. Do you think that it's more empowering because you hit that burnout phase? And do you think that you would have found this had you just kind of loved it all along?
That's a good question. I think it would have looked a lot different, and I think it would have happened a lot slower.
Yeah. I think sometimes we got to be put in the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the truth with this, is that I think because I became uncomfortable, I mean, there's some degree of like a job or a relationship or something that's not that bad is one of the most harmful, because if it's really bad, you're going to do something about it. Right. And so I guess I'm thankful in a weird way that things got to that point of like, this isn't working anymore. It's no longer growing you. What is the next step? And I could have been in there for another 10, 20 years before I realized it. And would I have grown? Sure, because I have other pursuits outside, but it would have been a really slow pace.
Yeah, and your cup still would have been filling, maybe not full, right? You still would have had the elements of working with your students and connecting and getting all and having all that element. But yeah, I think I agree, and I think most people listening have had this, like, you have to have this like moment that's pretty shitty to kind of push you into a new direction. But good for you. I mean, myself very much was like, check the boxes throughout life, like graduate, do well, get a job, get promoted. It was just like this checklist after checklist, waiting for the next checkbox to feel like success or happiness or whatever it was. And it's nice to see that I've learned along the way that we don't have to do that, but it's nice to see that you found the space where you're like, I don't have to do what everyone else is quote unquote expecting of me to do, to be, it's a good example. And I'm sure you're setting a great example for your daughter, too, and young, but at the same time, seeing you, and as she grows up, seeing you choose you and her and your wife, but choose the things that you want to do. There's so much that comes with modeling that she'll just take, even though you're not teaching her.
Right. Absolutely. Right. How do we set up a life for ourselves that we want her to step into something similar or better, right? Even better is the hope.
Or just trust herself. I think there's so much, that we're conditioned growing up, or at least in my generation, I was conditioned growing up thinking like I had to please everyone else. Like I had to, even losing my mom as a kid, I thought, okay, if I'm not perfect, my dad's going to abandon me too, because losing a parent feels like abandonment. And so I just assumed that everyone else around me was also expecting me to be perfect. And so it's nice and refreshing to see others in the space do the things that their heart is calling them to do. And I think it's really fascinating, to watch, because it's scary still to some part of my brain, thinking of like you making up your own choices.
100%. And it's scary to me some days as well, of like, am I going to be able to figure this out? And
the answer is yes.
Yeah. And I know that. I have a knowing, and I have this, like, I almost have the opposite now, where I look at people that I know have outwardly expressed they hate their job, and I just want to shake them and be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, life is so impermanent and important that you spend your time doing it how you want to. And I'm not saying that every single person should quit their job and go off and try to do their own thing, but walk towards alignment, whatever that means for you, right? Like, figure out what it is that brings you happiness and joy. What do you want more of in your life, and what do you want less of? And do something, take steps towards that to build a more beautiful life for yourself.
Well, maybe they'll see you doing it, and then you'll be their version of the real estate, your version of the real estate lady, and they'll see it and they'll see, oh, I can do that. That is possible.
Yeah.
Never know.
There's hope.
Yeah. What if this version, you could go talk to, like, deep in that burnout phase version of Ryan? Is there anything that, like, you feeling full and abundant in your life right now? Is there anything you'd want to say to him?
To the version of me like a year ago or so?
When you were like, oh, get me out of this.
It would be just have the confidence, like, get out of your own way and start. Take that first step, whatever that is, because the thing that gets in the way is your fear that you're not enough. That's where it all stems from. And I think once you're able to flip that coin and be like, absolutely, I'm capable of doing this, 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 and this, and you take that step, that leap, that commitment to choosing yourself, everything starts falling in place. I think I read something about jump and the net will appear. And there's so much truth to that, even though it sounds ridiculous, but there's so much truth to that, of like, you're going to figure it out, and you're going to put everything into figuring it out and creating that better life for yourself. Have faith, have trust in yourself that you're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's probably common across so many different stories. I talk to so many people about different life shifts in their lives. And when you think back of that person kind of in the mud, and they're like, it's not possible. And like, you hear these stories of resilience and you're like, oh yeah, it always was possible. Like, we're always going to figure it out, hopefully. But if we keep trying, if we keep taking the next step, we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it through. And it might not look exactly like we had hoped it would, but it's going to look the way that we needed or wanted it to. So yeah, good on you. Good on you for taking those steps.
Yeah, because usually it is a situation of crisis, right? That actually finally shakes somebody awake, and they're like, oh, I had a near miss with cancer, or I just lost somebody important to me. And then they reevaluate their life. And a lot of people, it's that slow burn that just keeps grinding them down, but they stay because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to make it in any other way, or they're afraid of the change.
They're scared of the unknown.
Yeah, which is reasonable. And also, like, run the scenario of what's the worst thing that happens. And usually it's a financial setback for a year.
Yeah. Most of the times the things we worry about don't ever happen. So
Right. Right. You're way worse.
Yeah.
Everything looks way worse. And that was part of my leaving teaching, was just like, what is everybody going to think? And that was, again, rumbling with but of course I had the worst case scenario of like what people are going to think of it. And
yeah. No, I think that's normal. I think sometimes we got to get out of our own way. Like you said, I think it's super important. So if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, read what you're writing, learn about your retreats, like what's the best way to like find you?
Best way would probably, I have a website. So my website is ryan-hennessey.com. Otherwise on Instagram and Substack. Substack is where all my writing is housed. My handle is I am Ryan Hennessey.
Well, we will link that in the show notes so people can, that's easy to get to. And I encourage people, if like you're feeling maybe the way Ryan did in his teaching career and things were okay, but not so great, something resonated with you, I encourage you to reach out, whether Ryan wants you to or not. I encourage
that. I'd love to connect. Yeah.
I think it's super important because you never know, like, just like you hearing that woman's story at that moment in time, that was something that like resonated with you, that you're just like, okay, time to move on, time to make decisions. And so someone might be listening to your story right now and thinking that was the sign I needed. So I encourage them to reach out to you.
Absolutely. And follow that inkling, because that inkling doesn't go away. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll just get bigger, and then you don't want to resent it, so you might want to just take action, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing your life shift moment and being a part of this healing journey that I am on. Maybe I will take some steps towards things that are feeling more aligned. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. It's been great.
For sure. And thank you all for listening. I appreciate it so much. This passion project, who knew that in 2022, this school assignment would turn into this many conversations that are so important. So thanks again, Ryan. Everyone else, I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.